Yeah. Hey, if it's true, then I'll live with it. All right. So welcome to Researching Happy. I've got a return guest and long-term friend, Professor Aaron Jarden. Welcome, Professor.
Thanks, Matt. It's fantastic to be here. Long-time fan of the show, and as I keep telling you, other than your mum, perhaps I'm the only one that's watched every
Yeah.
single episode.
And I keep telling you, my mum does not care about this, so she definitely hasn't listened to very many episodes. That's fine. How are you going?
I go really well, really well. As you know, I moved to Perth about 6 months ago, and I'm just loving it over here. I'm at a fantastic university not too many people would have heard about or known, Edith Cowan University, otherwise known as ECU, and it's a real up and comer. So I'm loving the leadership, I'm loving the vibe of the place, and it's just so much opportunity here. It's really really good.
Yep. So you've moved to the most isolated city in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
It is technically, yeah, and I learned yesterday also it's the most dispersed. Like it's the same footprint as LA, but
Oh,
no,
really?
so it just spreads out for miles, and that's what makes it good. There's just tons of fresh air and space and parks, and it just feels really clean and safe. So, there's kind of a bit of a joke around the locals about just don't tell too many people about Perth. If you can, don't want everyone coming here. Yeah, and it just feels really nice. And of course the beaches are lovely and the environment's lovely and all those things you see in the pictures as well.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Definitely a beautiful place, and I'm hoping to get back there later this year, actually. So I mean, tell us, what's the new role? What have you been up to?
I've taken on the role of associate dean postgrad in the School of Education. So I sort of overlook and oversee all the postgraduate programs in the School of Education. And Edith Cowan University, not that many people would know, is the #1 university in Australia for teaching quality. So they have great academics here that are really passionate about teaching, and especially the team that I lead, they're all stellar. So I've sort of moved a little bit more into management, and uh, also a full professor now, which is lovely. It feels like it's been a long time coming, but it's really lovely recognition. So I feel like I'm really lucky, touch wood. We've got an absolute fantastic dean, Caroline Mansfield, and the leadership above as well is very open and inclusive and transparent, and it just feels like a great place to be. And I'm just in that point in my career where I'm moving into management a bit more, and I'm sort of learning the ropes as well. And but it's just lovely to come to work with great people that are passionate about teaching, passionate about helping students, want to tackle great research questions, and just feel really valued. So it's one of those touch wood moments at the moment. Yeah,
Awesome. You could call that a promotion. You could call that selling out.
selling out, no.
You've sold out to the man. You're the leadership now.
Yeah, but I think my leadership style is very democratic, very inclusive. Um, I look at myself and the team that I lead as finding ways to enable them and lift them up. And it's when I look back over my career, it's not I mean, we published a great paper in Nature a few weeks ago. It's not that. It's more working with you guys and seeing how we've come along. And it's looking at my students. A couple of days ago, one of them summited Everest, and um, Lucy Hone's doing fantastic stuff with her new book as well. So it's all those things that really build a fantastic experience for a career, rather than sort of the stats or the those kind of metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm only just joking, obviously. All right, cool. So what we were hoping to chat about today, so we've got the European Conference of Positive Psychology coming up. Is it Congress or conference? I'm not sure actually. What's the C stand for? It doesn't matter. So what?
Conference, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
conference. Okay, cool. So we've got ECPP coming up. You are co-chair of the academic uh,
Committee.
committee. Thank you. My brain hasn't switched on just yet. I said to you before that I've been dealing with tantrums and stuff at home, so I'm a bit rattled actually. But yeah, what I'd love to chat to you about is like, what can people expect from the conference? Obviously, the last couple of podcasts, I think, that we've had have been pretty critical and sort of questioning about what do we think of the direction of pos psych, and even your sort of trajectory did come to mind. I don't want to go too far off, but like I do seem to, I am recognizing, I think, that a lot of people who are really doing a lot of work in pos psych have actually found themselves settling into other disciplines and actually like flourishing. I don't mean to say that as a joke. Flourishing basically by actually embedding themselves into, more established structures like schools of education or places like that. So where should we go from here? Do we talk about the conference, or do you want to talk about what do you think about, that kind of comment about finding yourself in a more established place and bringing well-being science to that place?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But let me tell you about the conference
Cool.
first because I'm super excited about it. Um, this is, I mean, people always get excited when conferences come up. It's a chance to re-engage with people, find out what the new ideas in the field are, all those sorts of things. But this one I think is particularly different, and what excites me about it is the philosophy behind it. So, Jolanta Burke at Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland was awarded the sort of ability from the European network to run this conference, and the first thing we did was put together a really interdisciplinary scientific committee of different levels of expertise because we wanted people on it that was sort of, not just all heading in the same way, but we wanted good debate around what this might look like. So the very first thing we did was have a few meetings, getting behind a vision of what a great conference experience would look like, particularly in regards to what we thought the field needed and where it was going. So, we were really clear right from the start. We wanted, compared to the other conferences, this is the 12th one in that series. We wanted to have much more debate, genuine debate, time for debate. We wanted much more meaningful conversations. So not the sort of, the speaker finishes and there's time for one or two questions, but actually 20 minutes. Not
Ah,
not not not
awesome.
not 2 minutes. We really wanted to focus on those chances of connecting, particularly for people that are new to this field. So we were really clear about what our vision looked like for this conference. Once we got to there, then we consulted the community. So we sent out surveys to all the stakeholders and asked them about what they wanted in their ideal conference. And from that, we focused a bit more on the theme of the conference as well, which is positive health, or the body meeting the mind. And we sort of took all this data together, and we chipped away as a committee around thinking about who would be the right people to invite to the conference as keynote speakers and invited speakers to get that kind of real rich flavor of, health has really been underrated and underrealized within positive psychology for many times. So this was really the focus of the theme of the conference. But close second was this idea of addressing the big problems of our day, the challenges of our day. So before we hopped on, I got a nice little quote from the conference website. It says, ECPP will boldly address some of the world's most pressing issues, such as war and poverty and climate change and non-communicable diseases such as cancer, obesity, and cardiovascular disease, exploring how positive psychology can meaningfully respond to these global challenges. So in addition to the kind of health focus, it's really thinking about how our field and our science can translate to contribute to making these wicked problems of our day go better. And I think that's really exciting, and I think that's really overdue. And we've had some people in the field like Mike Steger calling for this for a while, but now's a chance to all get together and actually have debates and get everyone's input, everyone in the room, so to speak, to focus on how we can pivot to do that. But also, I think, just stepping back to how the conference was organised, that we also had a philosophy or some points behind how we were going to run it compared to the way I've seen other conferences run. And the one thing that I really loved, other than consulting the community, and it's not just our show, was the transparent and democratic decision making
Yeah.
of this committee. So it wasn't just sort of one person gets in and sort of runs the show. It was really, 8 people around a table. Everyone had a voice. It was very inclusive. It was very transparent around how we were making decisions. There were criteria around representativeness of gender, of location in Europe, of field of study, of all sorts of things. So we were really clear we were being very inclusive and very representative, and I really liked that. But also the fact that I love it when I put an idea forward and people go, nah, that's crap. It's a nice little slap in the face that sort of wakes you up to actually, other people's ideas are great as well, and we can't sort of fit it all in. So I just love the feel of this committee. I really valued everyone's input, and I think the way that unfolded led to such a great program here.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so there's that part of it. the other part that I'm really excited about is I feel like this is a watershed moment for our field, and this conference is going to provide the space to actually put it all on the table. I get the feeling at other conferences, there's people dance around the important issues, that they don't talk about um, things that are really going to make a difference to how positive psychology evolves in the future, because they don't want to,
Said the
ruffle
apple cart,
feathers.
yeah.
Yeah, ruffle feathers or those sorts of things. But that's why the other key thing we've built into this is audience participation. So, we'll have people being able to put stuff through QR codes up on screens, and being part of this conversation, and not just sort of go to a microphone, but if somebody in the audience thinks leadership in this field is shit, they can say it, and they can be part of that conversation, or whatever the issue is that they think that's impacting the field.
Mhm.
Um, but the other part that I struggle to understand is, like, if you asked me, who the leaders are and where the field's going at the moment, I just have no idea. Like, I don't know what the plan is for positive psychology, and I'm
I
I
do know.
think pretty in touch with with most of the people at the front of the field. So I feel like it's a chance to get a piece of paper out and really scratch that out, and that's why we're starting the conference with the opening panel with you on it, which is fantastic. Really thinking about what the challenges are for the field and get everyone's input on that, and then ending the conference with a bit of a, well, given these challenges, what can we do about them? In the closing panel, led by the lovely Dr. Tayyab Rashid, the incoming president of yeah, so I feel like it's going to have more of a working feel to it rather than a just go along and listen feel to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do remember hearing someone, I won't say who they were, kind of, they're almost, I think at a conference they got like a quite a smaller time slot, and they were sort of saying like, this is a weird for me because I normally give keynotes. And I thought, not that they were being like, a diva about it or something, but this idea that I was kind of saying, the best conference is the one where anyone from the audience could get up and give a keynote. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
and that probably is the case in most of these academic spaces, but
yeah. Well, you don't know
we
it
never
yet,
get
but
those
actually on the, I didn't want to tell you, but in the opening panel, we're going to invite somebody from the audience onto the panel. You know, it's
Okay.
that's what we mean by inclusive, rather than just me pick somebody. Um, the other part that I think is super interesting, in regards to that was, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about?
About the audience participation and someone coming up
Yep.
from the audience to come onto to speak in the panel.
No, I've lost it. Hopefully, I'll circle
Okay,
back to it.
it'll come back to you. I was thinking about while you were talking, this idea of the role of positive psychology in war and peace, and I was thinking about Putin doing like a gratitude journal or something. But um, I'm sure that won't be the answer that we come up with.
No, no, no. I mean, I'm I'm super excited about it. Yeah, I think if there's one conference you pick to go to, I think this would be it. Yeah,
Very cool. So, and like Yolanta's probably a good example. Like you say, she's from, is it called the Royal College of Surgeons? That's again someone who's, in my mind, seems to be leading the space of pos psych, but in her world, but probably wouldn't call herself a positive psychologist. I don't know. I haven't met Yolanta before. That's that
I
kind
think
of.
she would.
Oh, she would.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Happy to be. Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Sorry. What was one of your questions? What was one of the ideas that you put up that someone said was a dumb idea?
Um, what's a good example? I can't think of that, but I can think of some of the good ideas that got up that are very novel. So the thing a lot of people are excited about at the moment is video abstracts. So, we had over, I think it was 900 submissions for this conference, which was a record by a mile. Like, I think the previous one had, I don't know if I got these numbers right, but more like 400 or 500. So we had, then, there's a huge amount of people wanting to come to this conference. And that's what I was thinking about before was, when you were saying people's things didn't get up, the amount of people that applied and didn't get a spot in the program that are the absolute leaders of this field. It's a mark of our process being so fair and transparent and democratic. So, it went through independent blind peer review. So people submitted abstracts. The people marking them didn't know who those were, and they were. We chose the program on the quality of the ideas and the rigor of the science alone. So there's no nepotism, there's no favoritism. So we've been dealing with emails from real leaders in this field who didn't get into the program and quite disappointed. And that's not I don't mean to disparage their applications, but just that kind of feeling of a lot of these conferences are the same people giving the same talks.
Uh-huh.
It's not that at all. This one, it's new. Well, I kind of like to see it as when I look across the program, there's a lot of future leaders of positive psychology and all the fresh blood, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, here. So, I'm excited about meeting some of these people that I haven't met before, and I've read some of their works now, and I'm excited about where the field could go if it's got some direction
Mhm.
with the people coming along to this conference.
Yeah, awesome. All right, cool. So in terms of the field, like this is the question I had for you basically. Like there is lots happening in wellbeing science. It feels kind of impossible to keep on top of everything. We spoke last time that we had you on about your role as the editor and co-founder of the International Journal of Wellbeing, which seems to be having more and more submission, like just crazy number of submissions.
Oh, it's literally 3 or 4 a day now. Yeah, it's going gangbusters. In
So
fact, growth is our biggest challenge. So, like any business, when they actually challenge, things are going well.
yeah, right. There you go. Well, I guess the question is like, how do you keep on top of this? And in my mind, like it does feel a little bit stagnant. I'm not sure. Like I see that I've said it before, and I think I said it on the comment, the chat that we did with Todd on Substack, where I did reference you, and I said that you told me to get a haircut, which I did go and do before before I went on. So thanks for that. But this idea of like, when I look around and say who's really doing this amazing work and leading, work resulting in change in government and policy and big publications and stuff, it's hard to get a feel of where this is all sort of coming from, but doesn't necessarily seem to be coming from positive psychology. So does that
Yeah.
sort of feel fair?
Oh, it feels 100% accurate to me too. Yeah, and the worrying bit is it's really hard to know what's happening, and when it's not coordinated in any kind of way like that. Yeah. Um, but again, circling back to the conference, that's what I really love about the people that are coming along. Like, what we really need is people with bold, fresh ideas, and we need to create. I think it's time for a new vision that's more inclusive. So when positive psychology started, it needed somebody to lead it and set that bold vision. And Seligman, had the goal of half the world flourishing and things like that. I think it's time to take stock and go, as a community, what is our vision now? Is it the same one? Is it something different? You know, I'd, that's what I'd love to. One of the outcomes I'd love to see from this conference. Yeah,
And that's actually probably a really good one because it's like that quote of half the world flourishing by 2051 or whatever it was. Like, but they never set a definition of flourishing. That's kind of like 25 years later or 26 or 27 years later. Like we still
yeah.
probably actually haven't got some of those sort of more fundamental answers down before we sort of race off onto some of these other more tangential ideas. I don't know. What do you think of?
Yeah, I think the issue was that was Marty's vision, and I think he's actually written to say that was James Pulowski's idea actually
Oh,
somewhere.
okay,
I
okay,
could have that wrong, but I don't think I have. Or maybe together. But what we really need is a collaborative vision. I think now maybe it's that same vision. But when the field was developing, somebody needed to put something on the table so people would start thinking
Mhm,
about it. And
mhm,
some people thought it was a terrible idea. Some people thought it was a great idea. Some people had slightly different ideas. I think now's the time to just circle back and go, actually, the field's developed, and now it's got some issues in
mhm,
regards to how it's growing, and I very much see it being getting left behind in many ways,
mhm.
and like you say, stagnating, and um, I just don't know what's going on, what the plan is. So I think now's the time to get those bold ideas on the table and get a community of people behind them.
And do you think that, I'm just thinking of someone's comment on a LinkedIn post. So again, I won't mention their name, but I'm thinking of them because they almost wrote this thing of like, you know, I talked about well-being science, this idea that basically, that does seem to, whether these are arbitrary names or whatever, but this idea that well-being science seems to be having much more traction than positive psychology. That feels the more stagnant kind of insular siloed approach, whereas well-being science seems to include more disciplines, obviously, and more of those people that I do see seeming to have like more traction, I guess, whether that's publications, government, whatever funding. And this person was sort of saying, well, I see them as synonymous, well-being science and positive psychology, and she all he or she also was referencing this idea of like not feeling like you're in the in crowd, which I completely understand. And I find that actually quite heartbreaking, this idea that there even would be a quote unquote, the in group. Um, in a academic field. Like, it just seems a bit crazy. Maybe that's just human nature and that's everywhere. But so I guess I'm just endorsing the rationale of you going with a more transparent and open approach.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I totally agree with all those points of view. I mean, there is substantial issues with the language and how that's interpreted by the lay public. You know, the words positive, the word psychology, but even wellbeing science. You know, wellbeing, I think, as a word is starting to get a bit of a negative rap as well. But even just the focus on science alone, I don't think is enough. You know, science really is a process. What we need is better thinking, and that's more the why including philosophers and other kinds of disciplines are really going to help us tackle these wicked problems, not just a scientific approach and getting more data sort of thing.
Yeah, I was actually listening to this podcast episode where they were talking about the friendship between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And apparently C.S. Lewis wrote this thing about the two hemispheres of his brain. I wish I had the quote in front of me, but this idea that he was from this tradition, I guess, that was much more academic, whereas Tolkien was from a more sort of story, literature, mythology place, and he talked about this this contrast. I think Lewis, this contrast between the hemispheres of this kind of dull, glib, scientific hemisphere, and this kind of beautiful, poetic, um, mythological hemisphere. And I do
Yeah,
think that that's part of it. Is this, we've talked a little bit about scientism in the past, this idea that we'll just answer all of these questions through the scientific process, and that's not really the only place for well-being science to sit, right?
yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there. One is, we've answered many of these questions already, and it's not that we don't know the answers; it's more the fact that we don't like them, and there becomes this political overlay to them. And the other part of it is, you could say there's not necessarily one of those approaches is right or wrong. It's just there are different lenses through which to view from a pragmatic perspective, view society or an issue, or view the world. So you might choose one lens that's more useful in one situation, another lens that's more useful in another. Yeah, but I think circling back to what we need to, I think, really do is to have to reorientate ourselves to asking better and more pertinent questions at this point in time, rather than ones that are in front of us.
Mhm.
And it's that questioning which I think's been really under realized or underrated. We're just sort of bumbling along and assuming we're on the right path, but I very much doubt we are. And so I think if we can come out of this conference by actually being really clear and asking better questions about where our field's going and all sorts of things like that, that'll be another big win.
And that's that's, I guess, the intention of the debate. It's not about I'm right, you're wrong. It's about can we get to the bottom of some of these better questions?
Yeah, like one question might be, what's worth researching in positive psychology? Let's maybe stop researching some areas and start researching some others, and actually get some input around the value of asking particular questions and how these line up with some of these real world problems, or what stakeholders kind of need, and these sorts of things. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and sorry, I was going to say, I wonder, it is ironic that people might hear that and be a bit confused. But so, I mean, I always do wonder. Even I'd be probably have done it myself, but sometimes you publish purely on the basis of what is feasible, not necessarily. What I mean. Like, oh, we have this data. I wonder what we could do with this. Because that sort of publish and perish kind of mentality, but to actually, and then you probably just get into a routine of that, of just let's just publish purely what is publishable, rather than actually sitting back and thinking what are actually the questions that we need to investigate.
Yeah, and that's really a shame on academia, really, rather than any one person. But we need to change that system. And I get a feeling that there's a realization of that, particularly in government and particularly fed through universities now, that we need to ask research questions which address real world problems
Mhm.
about, and for us, it's questions more about, what does the good life look like? What is an ideal day at work? What is a great day at work? There's tons of questions we can ask which align with that.
Mhm.
That are more useful to ask.
I often actually reference you there on that point of this idea that we you always speak about, well, what is a good, like that idea of what does good look like. We have had such a um we're all arguing about we need to do more for well-being, we need to promote well-being, and you've always, this is my interpretation, but sort of sat back and said, actually, you don't actually have a vision of what this would look like done well. Let's have that vision first, and then with that vision, you can then try and convince people. And we still don't.
Yeah.
We kind of like ran off before we actually settled some of those early things.
Yeah, and I think like a classic example now would be everyone's getting into AI, right? And governments, higher education, you name it. But basically AI will, provide you a quicker, better answer, but it won't help you ask a better question. And that's essentially the problem here. Yeah. So I think it's having that vision of, if we're going to have the government develop policy so that institutions share resources and get on the AI bandwagon, it's, for a purpose. What is that purpose? And that purpose is usually, for the benefit of creating an ideal, flourishing society. But again, there's no debate or vision really around what that exactly looks like, because you and I know that that's different for everyone. But until we get that foundation right, it's really hard to plug the solution, which is AI, into heading off into a direction which looks very murky and unclear.
Yeah. And well, and that's the other question I guess I have is like, how much agreement should there be? Because it's not that we're all just going to march in lockstep. We've come away from the conference and we're sort of like, okay, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, you're going to do this, and let's see each other in 2 years. What would I guess in your mind, like, what does good look like in this? What would a good outcome of the conference look like?
I think a good outcome would be a bold vision for the future of the field,
Mhm.
some insight into how it can get there as well, because that might require different structures than we've currently got. Um, it might require organisations, for example, to be more democratic and more transparent, or whatever those solutions look like. But I think if we could come away from this conference by just more realization that actually it's actually heading the wrong direction or floundering, or I forget the word you used, but actually we need to course correct, and we need to do that in a way which embraces the philosophy of the people that are involved in this field. But like some of the things we're thinking about, I think that would be a good win. So we don't need to solve all the problems at the conference, but I think just how it's going to end with actually thinking about how we're going to tackle these challenges, and particularly getting positive psychology and the health sciences and lifestyle medicine more aligned, I think will be a big win. Because once we can sort of demonstrate a little bit more value, then particularly with health, then we can sort of start demonstrating its value in other areas,
Mhm.
such as education and so forth as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great answer. Um, no comments, actually. I'm just letting that sink in. I did find that C.S. Lewis quote, if I can read that to you. Just I know that I probably butchered it before. So he said, this was on the dichotomy between his intellect and his creativity in his spiritual autobiography, Surprised by Joy. The two hemispheres of my mind were in the sharpest contrast. On the one side, a many islanded sea of poetry and myth; on the other, a glib and shallow rationalism. Nearly all that I loved belonged to the. Nearly all that I loved, I believed to be imaginary. Nearly all that I believed to be real, I thought grim and meaningless. Again,
That's
I'll go for
that's that's quite hitting. I mean, I was thinking of a different quote. As you know, my favorite quote is Ralph Emerson: "Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm." So, coming back to the conference again, that'd be a lovely outcome if people leave really enthusiastic about how they want to impact the field going forward.
it.
Because that quote is so true. You get some enthusiastic people behind something, good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, this is cool. And so, I mean, in terms of enthusiastic, what are you most excited for? I think we've spoken about, like particularly in terms of what you're going to learn. Is there one perspective or one speaker that you've never had the chance that you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I've never actually seen Carol Riff. I just seem to have missed her at all the conferences I've been to. She's been at plenty of conferences that I've been to, but as with these things, there's always competing demand. Actually, that's the other great thing about this conference is we really designed it in a way that it wasn't sort of, here's 8 sessions to go, and I want to go to all of them, sort of a feeling. We've just sort of lowered the bar and said, if you want to record your talk or get someone to record it to you, great, put it on YouTube, send it to us, we'll put it on the website. So this feeling of, a lot of these conferences, the conference organizers or the committees sort of clamp down and go, if it's not high quality, we don't want you to record it, and actually you're not allowed to record anything and whatnot. We're just more of a sharing, open So I think out of this will come some great resources, particularly with those video presentations. Where people, this is what I was going to say before, but I didn't get onto, where because we had so many submissions, 900 plus or whatever it was, we've provided the opportunity for people to record their talks, and then we'll put it up on our website a couple of weeks before the conference starts, so that people traveling to the conference can download them and watch them on the way. Then at the conference, those people that recorded the talks get a spot in the program. It's only a short one. I think it's 5 or 10 minutes, where people can turn up and talk about their talk. So we call it a discussion presentation. So we'll end up with this great library of much of the work that's going on in the field, that people can turn up and connect with somebody and see many more talks than they would just within a short few days. There'll be hundreds of these going up. So I'm super excited about that opportunity as well. But this was us more thinking about how we could be more inclusive with some of the leading ideas that people are working on, rather than just a short, narrow program. But the other part that I started off with saying was, that feeling of, there's a keynote and some invited speakers, and there's another kind of session here, and how am I going to choose? We've just put all the talkers, at the same time. So it's going to be easier to navigate and make choices. Between types of talks that you want to see. It's a convoluted way of saying it, but we think it's going to be a bit of a winner.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, there's sometimes like 7 streams, and you have to make these decisions and run from one side to the other, and you go, I'm by seeing this, I'm missing this, this, and this. But I do like the video thing. It's definitely out of the box as a solution. But what I do like about it is it's like kickstarting the networking in a sense. I think people go to conferences wanting to find people who have like-minded ideas, or maybe they have a solution to a problem you've been dealing with, or something like that. And you try desperately, I guess, to fit that into 2 or 3 days, and actually the odds are that you miss them, or you don't see them at the networking event or whatever. Whereas this way, you sort of get the ball rolling in advance of the conference.
Yeah, this was just one idea that, when we sat down and thought genuinely, how could we connect people? This is one that came out. Yeah.
Very good. I was looking forward to one of yours that got slapped down, but it sounds like they've slipped.
I'm still trying to think
conveniently.
I'm still trying to think of a good example of that. Yeah.
That's okay.
Well, was it you? I think it was you when we used to work together. I think, it might have been Gabe. Somebody once told me that, what's the phrase? I have fantastic ideas, but I also have ideas with holes so big you could drive a rubbish truck through them.
And who decides which one's which, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the great of being in a great sort of collaborative community on that committee. Yeah.
In many ways, like, I guess you are talking about that kind of concept. Maybe this is a bit lame or what, but that sort of psychological safety is that, and that maybe like previous conferences that you've mentioned and maybe different associations are not actually that psychologically safe, in the sense that, and the definition here is, I guess I'm saying like the confidence to basically go and speak your mind and say what you think is true, knowing that won't have negative repercussions on you.
Yeah, and that's what we want to target. So we talked a lot about that. That's what we want. That's what we want the feeling to be, and that's what we want to target and sort of allow the enabling conditions for. We've just also got to realize we've got to do it in a responsible way that doesn't sort of defame people or organizations and things like that. So it's that balance of actually giving people a voice and being able to put it on the table, but doing it in a respectful way. So that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, awesome. And this is
we might just investigate if we can mute your microphone at some point during the opening panel.
Yeah, I'm pro defamation, I think. Just joking. You know what is a cool thing that they used to have at Samri? I don't know if you remember it. It was like a beach bowl microphone.
Oh yeah, we used to throw it around. Yeah. That little box. It was cool.
It was cool, but it was something that you could actually catch, like something that was sort of like a decent size. I don't know, some people can't see my hands, but
it's like a soccer ball but square.
Yeah, and soft basically, but it had a microphone in there, and I thought that was such a cool way of, rather than just like, wait for the person holding the microphone to walk around, just kind of ditch this thing, and it makes its way down. But this idea that it was kind of like enabling like accessibility in a sense.
Yeah. And it was playful too.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the other themes of the conference. So this conference feels a little bit different to the other conferences in the field in the sense of it is more playful, it is more social, it's not hierarchical, it's not sort of that corporate conferencey feel.
Mhm.
Well, still, it's a proper academic conference. We're still rigorous science and whatnot, but we're also, that playfulness is, I think, one of the key things people love coming to this conference series for.
Yeah. I've actually never been to the European conference. I should have said that from the start. I've never been, and I've been to a
Really?
lot of, yeah, so like it just has an outline, and
Oh,
it
you're in for a
sounds,
treat.
yeah, okay. Well, I heard it was so good the last one, but the I was going to say earlier when you said that Tayab is doing the closing. That's really cool. That the sort of the European conference and the the, sort of the with representation of IPA, maybe that represents these two organizations kind of getting a little bit closer, maybe being more collaborative. I don't know if they've been collaborative in the past or not, but but I wonder like how, yeah, what has the difference been sort of historically between the European conference and the IPAs?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, not being involved in either of the associations, I don't really know, but I do know that they sort of, you know, provide space in each other's conference to talk about, their next conferences and things like
Okay.
that. Um, I invited Tyab to do the closing session more because I know he's just a great facilitator and he's a great thinker. And we also wanted this closing session to be just a female panel. So we've got sort of 5 females. So I thought it'd be nice to have him. He's for a lot of reasons he was a really good fit for this. But also as the incoming president of IPA, to sort of signal the next conference. He's in charge of running their conference next year. Um,
Yeah, very cool. Um, the other thing, this is probably just a bit of a phase change now to talk about something related but different, I guess. Like thinking so much of the conversations we've had about pos psych in this podcast in general, sometimes it's come down to confusion of like where does positive psychology sort of begin and end? This idea that we can look at like really some like poor practice and think, oh, the people will look at that and go like, look at these people, what are they doing? Positive psychology is bullshit, that kind of idea. But that's not really like, that's quite downstream, I guess, from the papers and the publications and the academics and stuff like that. And then probably you can point to other practices in publications and stuff and have a problem with that too. But it does seem to me that there's this miscommunication of like, where does the boundary of pos psych sort of begin and end? Particularly like, and I think you've changed my perspective on this a few times, like this idea that we have the opportunity, whether it's been done well or not in the past, this opportunity of like translating research to practice extremely fast, like faster than um, might happen in other disciplines, and that probably comes with risks that we've underappreciated, but it comes with some strengths as well that we likely haven't probably realized. That's I think you've really changed my mind on that. This idea that actually it's quite unique as an opportunity to have practice and science so close together. Um, I guess I wanted to ask you, and maybe this is relevant to the conference or not, like this conversation around what is the translational sort of the potential of pos psych into the community and into government and policy.
yeah, I think it's huge, and that's why I started that with Dan Veyer's that conference series, Wellbeing and Public Policy, because it's a huge vector for change. So we've got this idea that positive psychology or wellbeing science, it's kind of it's almost like a supervening concept in the sense of any subdiscipline, usually within psychology, will be interested in well-being as an outcome. Then we have all that conceptual creep and overlap around, what's well-being, what's ill-being, and where's my scope within my field of, where does counselling psychology start and end? Same issues across the field of psychology, not just positive psychology. Um, yeah, so these are all really hard things to navigate. But I think what I'm discovering is it's a bit like a huge jigsaw puzzle with 20 pieces to get that translation piece right. We need the sort of political will, we need this sort of funding, we need this sort of industry on board, we need the research capability, training, and the people that are going to do the work, and there's all these pieces moving around, and I think we've had a pretty good go at sort of one piece after another and putting a few pieces together. But actually, to get the puzzle to look good and be finished, we kind of need to bring all of those pieces together in a very kind of coordinated way, which is where I'm sort of saying if we have that vision of what the end looks like and what all those pieces are, which is what you'd probably work out through something like an appreciative inquiry summit, then we've got this better plan. And then I keep sort of looping back to it. It all starts with those important conversations with key stakeholders. And for us, I think one that we've really neglected is just the field of psychology. Positive psychology is sort of forged on its own, but not really thought about how it integrates within the broader field of psychology as a field itself. And you sort of hinted at it about people coming into pos psych and then going off and sitting in their field of social psychology or wherever, making great strides there because they have those two sort of lenses, the discipline they were trained in, and then bringing positive psychology back to that. And Chris Peterson, you stay at the start of the field, he didn't know which way it was going to go, whether it would become its own entity or whether it would really just merge into or be subsumed by their subfields. And I still think we're at a juncture of a bit of both of those are happening. So again, this is why we kind of need some better direction. I look at organizations in psychology like the one in Australia here is fantastic. I think the one in America is amazing in regards to how well it's coordinated, the resources it develops, the training programs. These associations are just fantastically organized and fantastic in regards to resources. And I don't feel like I don't see that in positive psychology. I couldn't tell you one thing that an organization in positive psychology's um, leading or done well in the last wee while, sort of thing. It's great. It's great for connecting with people, but beyond that, I don't know if you have the same sort of feel or whether you're a member
I
of
have
other
the
organizations, but
Yeah, I mean, I have the exact same feel. I think that when we say positive psychology, basically anywhere outside of positive psychology, they laugh at it. That's the truth, more or less. More or less. That's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but there's some concern about the validity or the quality of whatever you're about to talk about. I think if you say well-being science, there is more openness.
yeah,
Now
which
that's
is strange, right? Because you look at the data, and it's been the fastest growing field within psychology for at least the last 10 years. It's really, and now it's about 10% of the whole field. So, they can laugh at it from a sort of it might be an uninformed perspective.
yeah.
I feel like it's at a size and scale now that you can't sort of just discount it. But I think some of the worries behind their laughs around the quality of the science and the way the field operates, are all pretty valid.
Well, that's I guess what I'm talking about is probably my frustration that, it has, I do think it probably, like you, as you said, it did make sense to sort of like just close itself in a little box just to begin with, because you have to say you're a thing, to grow
Yeah.
this momentum.
But it still feels like it's there now.
Well,
And this is,
exactly.
20 years later or
Yeah,
25 years later. So
exactly.
the question is, how long does it need to stay like that?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that,
And I
um,
guess, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of the leaders of the field retire and pass away. So, now does feel like a good time to get that freshness to that. But I would just love to see it happen in a very inclusive and democratic way.
absolutely. Well, that's probably what my frustration. I've said it before in other places, but to answer your question before, like my frustration is that we have actually played into those critiques. We actually haven't done much about it, and I think individuals improve their practice, and there are individuals that are rock solid, but they aren't necessarily the people who are in these leadership roles, or who are getting the keynotes and things like that in pos psych. So that's my feeling there. I do wonder. You said something before, but now I've forgotten what I was going to say about it. Doesn't matter. Um, this question of no, it's slipped past me
We
now.
were back talking about translation. I didn't really answer your first question about how we do that better. There's a whole bunch of things that we've got better at over time. Better assessment and evaluation. Including better ethical practice into the way people go about things.
Mhm.
But a lot of the way the field's developing, really, it's the same issues across the social sciences and the other applied fields as well. So, I really don't see a lot of us learning from other fields or looking outwards and integrating with them, which I think is a bit of a shame. Um, but back to the translation issue, we know from the data already that if we get it right, it can have huge value both economically, socially, personally, and whatnot. So it's we're slowly getting people's ideas around the value of it, which is great. Then it's kind of, well, how do we do it and sustain it? And that idea of sustainable well-being, Tim Lomas is talking a lot about it at the moment. That's another one that I really think we need to crack as well. Um, you know, what does that look like over time?
Yeah, and Yeah, I remember what I was going to say before, but just quickly, what does he mean by sustainable well-being? I haven't come across that yet.
Well, that's it. Like we need to define the concept. That's one of the missing pieces. Yeah. So he's currently convening a, a bunch of people to talk about that that shortly with a foundation out of Japan. Yeah, and I think that's
Oh,
exciting. You know, if we can get some conceptual clarity around not just what well-being is, but what does actually sustainable well-being kind of look like. Yeah.
But what do you even mean by sustain? Like, I get that you're going to define it, but you're talking about like the fact that like is it the idea of like well-being can be sustainable without you know other economic costs preventing it or something like that, or what is it that you're
Well, everything's on the table. It's just
okay?
here's a concept would be good to get clear about, and then put that as part of a picture of the I don't want to call it a sales pitch, but you know, of what we're heading for.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Well, I mean, like, I guess thinking about it out loud, it does not feel sustainable at the moment. That's for sure. It seems that well-being comes at the cost of other things. That's
Yeah,
all this effort is like slowly burning out. Basically, that's what it feels like.
yeah. To me, it feels like well-being's, you know, that old phrase, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It feels like well-being's stepping back from the table and might be on the menu shortly because, you know, as we see society evolving and we've got these big problems with wars and, you know, there's a whole list of them, people's attention gets diverted and they stop thinking about, you know, the good and they start
Mhm,
thinking about the bad. And you know, as society's developing with technology, you know, where you know it's becoming an attention society, and you know, a society with less accountability than it used to be. So society itself, for a bunch of reasons, is changing in different ways, but those ways don't have well-being in the picture, which is the part we need to tackle.
mhm.
We need to put, you know, as I think Seligman said at one point, pull people into that better vision of a future, rather than keep trying to push them to where we want them to go.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and that goes back to what I remember that I was going to say. You sort of talked about like um, psychological associations of how well they are structured and the resources that they offer their members and things like that. Um, we presented to the APS, and I think you're going to be the next. You might have already done yours. I
Yeah,
think
I
you
did
were the
about a
next
month
one.
ago. Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I must admit that those associations have been around a lot longer, so they've had more of a chance to get organised. Yeah,
Absolutely, but I guess for us, like you and I, presenting some of our work, it did feel like a bit of a moment for us because it's like we've been doing this for 10 years now, sort of properly, is what it feels like. And at the start of those 10 years, like clinical psychology did not believe what we had to say or did not care, didn't find any relevance. And so to be invited 10 years later, I'm obviously sort of dramatizing it, but the fact that basically we could have, however many, it was a couple of hundred, I think, in the audience of clinical psychologists who actually see the value of how do I promote mental well-being? Why should I promote it? How do I evaluate the impact that I might be having, in addition to clinical symptoms? That's just quite a moment. And I think that you can imagine that actually building on what is existing, it might be that time to now build on what's existing rather than to keep forging ahead with this new thing.
yep, yep. That's a good point.
Very, very good. Very good. All right, Aaron. Thank you for joining me. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else that's worth just highlighting, whether it's to do with the conference or anything you've got coming up that's interesting and exciting?
Well, but mostly it's a conference. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be one of those special ones that you know people talk about, and you know, is hopefully some good initiatives will come out of it. But you know, at the moment, I just love how it's been put together. I love looking at who's coming along because I know there's some Mike Steger, Stuart Donaldson. You know, there's some stellar people in the field who have great ideas that are going to be there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Um, all right. Thank you very much, Aaron. I really appreciated your time.
Pleasure, Matt. Always lovely to chat.
No worries. Cheers.